It's the early hours of October 17th, 2000. A quiet autumn morning in Lincoln, Nebraska. The streets were mostly empty by this time, and the bars had long since closed. Most people were asleep, preparing for another ordinary Tuesday. But across the street from a neighborhood pub, something was waiting. A Saturn sedan, parked exactly where it had been left hours earlier. Inside the vehicle's trunk sat a guitar. Not just any guitar, though. No, this guitar belonged to a woman who rarely let it out of her sight. The trunk was slightly ajar, and the guitar was inside. The woman was not. 40-year-old Regina Marie Bos had simply vanished. No signs of a struggle, no witness to an abduction, no body, and no answers. And more than 2 decades later, investigators still believe someone knows exactly what happened that night. This is a story of a mother, a musician, a dreamer, a woman whose life finally seemed to be turning around, and the mystery of the night she disappeared. This is Cold Case Nebraska, the disappearance of Gina Bos. This is part 1. Lincoln, Nebraska has always been known as a city of neighborhoods, a place where families raise children, where people know their neighbors, and where life often moves at a little slower pace than in larger cities. But like any city, Lincoln has its secrets. Some are hidden for years, others remain hidden forever. The disappearance of Regina Marie Bos is one of those secrets. For more than 25 years, her family has searched for answers. Her children grew up without knowing what happened to their mother. Her siblings have spent decades keeping her story alive. And investigators have pursued leads, rumors, and theories that ultimately led nowhere. What happened to Gina Bos remains one of Nebraska's most enduring mysteries. But before she became a missing person, before her face appeared on flyers and billboards, before detectives began piecing together her final hours, she was simply Gina, a daughter, a sister, a mother, a friend. And according to those who knew her best, Gina was impossible to ignore. Regina Marie Bos was born Regina Marie Rapp on November 4th in 1959 in Lincoln, Nebraska. She was the third of 7 children in a large family where resources were often limited, where everyone learned early how to make the most of what they had. And one thing the family always had was music. Her father was a preacher who frequently traveled to churches throughout the region. When he went, the children often went too. And together they sang gospel music for congregations across Nebraska. Music wasn't simply a hobby in the Rapp household. It was part of the family's identity. Gina's grandfather played the violin. Her grandmother played the piano. Every one of the children seemed to find some connection to music. But for Gina, that connection would become a lifelong passion. Even as a child, Gina stood out. Family members described her as outgoing, fearless, strong-willed, stubborn, and completely unafraid to speak her mind. If she believed something was right, she would say so. If she believed something was wrong, she would say that too. And most people admired that quality about Gina, and others may have found it intimidating. But nobody ever accused Gina of being timid. She had a creative spirit that seemed to spill into every area of her life. She enjoyed painting, sculpting, designing clothes, experimenting with hairstyles. She seemed to be drawn to anything that allowed her imagination room to breathe. But no creative outlet captured her heart quite like music, especially the guitar. After graduating from high school in 1978, Gina searched for direction. Though never completed a degree, Gina attended college in Minneapolis for a period of time. Later, she would earn a cosmetology license through the College of Hair Design. Still, she struggled to find a career that truly fit. Throughout her 20s, she worked a variety of jobs while continuing to chase her creative passions. And eventually, music reclaimed center stage. Gina dreamed of becoming a singer-songwriter, and there was one instrument that became almost an extension of herself, a guitar she named Harley. Friends and family say Harley went almost everywhere Gina went, to restaurants, gatherings, parties, open mic nights, sometimes even places where bringing a guitar seemed unnecessary. But Gina was protective of it. She worried it might be damaged. She worried it might be stolen. Most of all, she just loved Harley. For many musicians, an instrument is simply an object. For Gina, Harley was something more. It was a companion, a source of comfort, a piece of who she was, which, knowing all of that, makes what happened later all the more troubling. In 1983, at the age of 23, Gina married Thomas Williams. Together, they had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. By all accounts, both parents loved their children deeply. But over time, not unlike many, the marriage began to unravel. The couple divorced in 1991. Despite the divorce, they maintained an amicable relationship. They successfully co-parented the children and remained committed to their well-being. Years later, in 1996, Gina married again to David Bos. That marriage was relatively short-lived, but once again, the separation appears to have been remarkably civil. Family members later described the divorce as 2 people realizing they cared deeply for one another, but were no longer in love. And even after the marriage ended, they remained friends and stayed in contact. By the year 2000, however, Gina's life had become more complicated. Like many single parents, she was facing financial challenges. Money was tight, and there were periods when simply paying the bills required constant effort. But despite the difficulties, those closest to her say she never stopped fighting for her children, never stopped trying to build a better life. Finally, after years of setbacks, things appeared to be changing. In July of 2000, Gina began dating a man named Mike Johnson. Friends say the relationship was going well. She had also secured a position with FedEx Kinko's. And more importantly, she had recently been promoted to manager. For Gina, this was more than a promotion. It represented stability, security, a chance to provide a better future for her children. And then came another piece of good news. She had just made the top of the list for a Habitat for Humanity home. This was huge and incredibly good news. Soon, Gina and her children could have a home of their own, a fresh start. And for the first time in years, the future for Gina seemed brighter than it had in a long time. And that makes what happened next feel all more heartbreaking. Because on October 16th, 2000, Gina was having one of the best days of her life. And while having one of the best days of her life, she just didn't know it would be her last day anyone would ever see her. Stay tuned for part 2.